There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes that her loudest power is not in what she says, but in what she no longer reacts to. Not in who she convinces, but in who she stops chasing. And not in how much noise she makes, but in how deeply she listens to herself. Silence is not surrender, it is strategy. And when a woman pulls back her energy from the world and begins to turn it inward, the world begins to shift around her. This is not about revenge. It is not about ego. It is the quiet revolution that begins the moment you stop explaining and start evolving. So let me ask you, are you ready to fall silent and finally hear your life speaking back to you? When a woman becomes silent, most people misunderstand her. They assume she's given up, that she's weak, that she has no voice, no courage, no fight left in her. But that assumption only exposes the mindset of the one observing, not the one evolving. Because silence, when chosen, is not the absence of power, it is the concentration of it. In the monastery, we say, the deeper the water, the stiller it becomes. And so it is with the woman who has suffered, endured, and finally understood. There is no need to prove anything to anyone anymore. There is no need to explain her worth, argue her truth, or entertain what drains her spirit. The very act of disengaging becomes her discipline. Silence is not submission. It is sacred retraction. The woman who speaks endlessly often dissipates her energy outward. She becomes reactive. Her mind is tied to the noise outside her. But the woman who chooses stillness, who pauses, who listens inward instead, she begins to master something that no loud voice ever could presence. She sees without reacting. She feels without collapsing. She knows without announcing. That is a different kind of strength, a quieter, slower, more grounded kind of power, and yet so much more unshakable. Look at nature. The lioness does not roar before every move. She observes, she stalks. She knows exactly when to conserve and when to strike. The mountain does not explain its stillness to the storm. It just stands, immovable, ancient, witnessing. The modern world has confused constant expression with empowerment. But in truth, many women have become trapped in a loop of overexplaining, overgiving, and overproving. Each word becomes a plea for understanding. Each reaction becomes a thread binding them to the emotional chaos of others. So what happens when she stops? When she finally realizes that not every disrespect deserves a response? Not every invitation to conflict must be accepted. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. She creates space. And in that space, clarity begins to rise. That silence becomes a mirror. It reflects truth. It reflects alignment. It reflects all the energy she once gave away and is now returning to herself. This is why silence, in its truest form, is a discipline of containment. It means holding your power without spilling it. It means choosing peace over performance. It means allowing others to reveal themselves while you remain still, watching unmoved. And slowly everything starts to shift. Because the people who once fed off her reactions, who relied on her explanations, now find nothing to pull on. There are no emotional levers left exposed. She becomes inaccessible to chaos. Now, this is not the silence of suppression. This is not the silence forced upon women for centuries, where they were told to remain quiet, small, obedient. That silence was fear. This silence is consciousness. It is the product of a woman who knows her truth so deeply, she no longer needs to shout it. And the paradox is this: the less she speaks, the more she's heard. The less she explains, the more others begin to question their own actions. The more still she becomes, the more movement begins to happen around her. She stops chasing alignment, and alignment begins to seek her. This is what happens when a woman stops using her voice to manage others and starts using her silence to master herself. Once a woman understands the power of silence, the next step unfolds naturally. She begins to shift her focus, not outward toward the chaos, but inward toward herself. This is not selfishness. This is not narcissism. This is sacred discipline. Because the woman who has spent years, maybe decades, managing everyone else's emotions, carrying the invisible weight of relationships, of expectations, of unspoken demands, eventually reaches a point of quiet awakening. What would happen if I gave that energy to myself? And the answer is not loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It arrives like a whisper in the stillness, like a seed touching fertile soil. Self-focus is not about turning your back on the world. It's about facing yourself completely, maybe for the first time. To focus on yourself means becoming aware of the subtle patterns that run your life, the emotional triggers, the habitual compromises, the constant measuring of your worth based on how well others respond to you, and then dismantling those illusions, gently, patiently, daily. Self-focus is not a single moment. It is a lifelong martial art. The discipline begins in the smallest places, waking up and resisting the pull to check your phone first, because your energy belongs to you first. Saying no when your body is tired, even if you're used to being the one who never lets anyone down. Setting boundaries with a calm, "I will not tolerate this," without over-explaining your reasons. Each act is small, but repeated over time, it becomes a revolution. The woman who practices this discipline starts to glow differently. Not because she is seeking to be seen, but because she has learned to see herself. She becomes a guardian of her own energy. Not every emotion gets a reaction. Not every invitation gets a yes. Not every compliment fills her cup, because she's already been filling it herself. She learns to observe her own mind, to witness her own breath, to sit in her own presence without discomfort. This is the difference between numbing and knowing. Most people escape into others. They lose themselves in relationships, distractions, validation seeking. But she returns inward. She begins to cultivate inner ground that does not shift when others pull away or come close. She becomes her own center, her own gravity, and something remarkable happens. The more she returns to herself, the less she needs to be chosen, because she has already chosen herself. The world often praises women for their selflessness, but no one warns them that a life of chronic selflessness can become a form of self-erasure. That pouring from an empty cup is not generosity, it is self-abandonment. So now she reclaims what was always hers: time, space, intention. This is not easy. Turning inward means facing the parts of yourself you once avoided, the regrets, the suppressed rage, the grief no one ever asked you about. But it is in that darkness that the deepest roots take hold. No tree grows tall without roots buried deep, and no woman stands in her full power until she faces the underground parts of herself, the ones the world never applauds, but that silently hold her up. So she creates new rituals. She walks alone, not out of loneliness, but to reconnect with her own rhythm. She journals not to produce words, but to empty what was never hers to carry. She eats, moves, breathes slowly, consciously, treating her body not as an afterthought, but as a temple. And again, those around her begin to feel the shift. They notice she is no longer as easily available, no longer instantly reactive, no longer emotionally entangled in stories that were never hers. She does not explain this shift. She does not justify her focus, because she knows what grows in silence becomes unshakable. This self-focus is not a pause, it is the path. It's not a break from the world. It is preparation to re-enter it differently, not from emptiness, but from fullness. And in that fullness, she becomes untouchable, not because nothing affects her, but because she has finally learned where to direct her sacred attention. Once a woman turns her attention inward and begins cultivating herself with sacred discipline, something subtle but profound begins to happen. She stops performing. She no longer feels the urge to adjust her tone to please, to over-explain so others don't misunderstand, to smile through discomfort or nod in agreement just to avoid tension. Because all of those behaviors were performances, not out of deception, but out of survival. For years, maybe decades, she learned to play roles that helped her fit in, be accepted, be loved. But these roles come at a quiet cost. They fracture the self. To perform means to wear a mask, even if it is a beautiful one. To embody presence is to finally take it off, piece by piece, breath by breath, Presence doesn't demand approval. It doesn't require attention. It simply is. And that's what makes it so powerful. When a woman embodies her presence, she enters a room and does not chase the energy. She becomes the energy. She speaks when it matters, and when she doesn't, her silence is not emptiness. It's intentional space. She listens without the need to react. She observes without the urge to fix. And she walks without narrating her every move, because her worth is no longer tied to being noticed. In a society that rewards performance, louder voices, curated images, constant updates, presence becomes a quiet rebellion. Presence is undistracted. It is whole. It does not fluctuate with opinion or bend under pressure. It is the woman who sits alone in a cafe, not scrolling her phone, but simply being at peace in her own company. It is the woman who says no without a 10-minute justification, who doesn't apologize for her clarity. It is the woman who can listen to someone speak and not interrupt, because she is not waiting to defend or impress. She has nothing to prove anymore. You see, performance is exhausting because it relies on feedback. It's a loop. Was that okay? Did they like it? Do they approve? But presence is sovereign. It does not need applause. This shift from performing to being is subtle and terrifying for those who once controlled her through guilt, approval, or silence. Because now she is no longer emotionally programmable. She does not light up at breadcrumbs of validation. She no longer molds herself to be palatable, agreeable, or less intense. She is not less of anything. She is fully herself and calm in that fullness. And this calm, this groundedness, it unsettles people who once relied on her to mirror their chaos. They can no longer provoke the same emotional reactions. She doesn't argue, doesn't plead, doesn't overcorrect. She simply sees and chooses whether to engage or withdraw. This is the fruit of presence, discernment without drama, compassion without compromise, power without noise. But don't mistake this for passivity. The woman who has become present is more alive than ever. Her senses are sharper, her movements more deliberate, her thoughts more focused. Because when you stop performing, your nervous system finally gets to rest. The body no longer burns itself out trying to stay light. The mind no longer races with what ifs and imagined responses. The heart no longer leaks energy to places where love was never reciprocated. This restoration of presence is not just psychological. It is physiological. She sleeps better, breathes deeper, thinks clearer. She no longer has to keep up with the exhausting rhythm of others' expectations. She has returned to her own breath, her own pace. And through this quiet rootedness, her very existence becomes a mirror to others. People begin to notice their own noise in her silence, their own neediness in her boundaries, their own emotional instability in her poise. This is the paradox. She now does less, but affects more. She says less, but is heard more deeply. She gives less, but the quality of her presence heals more profoundly. She doesn't have to perform to prove that she matters. She just has to be fully here. When a woman no longer performs, she no longer overextends herself to earn space. She simply claims it through her presence, through her silence, and most of all, through her boundaries. But we must understand something clearly. Boundaries are not walls. They are not ultimatums. They are not punishments. They are clarity. They are self-respect made visible. They are the energetic lines drawn not to shut people out, but to protect what is sacred within. A woman with no boundaries leaks energy. She says yes when she wants to say no. She stays quiet when something violates her values. She absorbs chaos that was never hers to carry. And for a long time, she might believe that this is kindness, that patience means tolerance, that love means endurance. But there comes a point, quiet, clear, undeniable, when she realizes, every time I abandon myself to keep the peace, I create war within. So she stops, not with rage, not with rebellion, but with a calm so pure that it can no longer be manipulated. She no longer explains herself endlessly. She no longer justifies why she cannot tolerate disrespect. She simply does not allow it, because her energy is too valuable to spend on negotiation. And the shift is profound, because when a woman sets boundaries from presence, not from pain, they become unshakable. She no longer seeks validation for her decisions. She no longer folds when guilt is applied. She no longer betrays herself in order to be understood. Her boundary is not an argument. It is a posture. And that posture communicates far more than any words could. It says, I respect myself enough to walk away from what makes me question my worth. I don't need to raise my voice because I am no longer trying to be heard by those who refuse to listen. I do not entertain chaos because my peace is not up for negotiation. People who once relied on her emotional flexibility, who were used to her overgiving, her overexplaining, her emotional labor, now find themselves in unfamiliar territory. She doesn't react the way she used to. She doesn't absorb the blame. She doesn't participate in dynamics that drain her. And they often say, "You've changed." But the truth is, she simply returned to herself. The self that existed before she was trained to please. Before she learned that love must be earned through self-sacrifice. Before she believed that silence meant compliance. Now her silence is not submission. It is selection. She selects who gets access. She selects when to engage. She selects where her energy flows. And this discernment creates a powerful ripple. Those who are healthy, who respect her, step closer with care. They adjust, they honor, they listen. But those who benefited from her lack of boundaries begin to fall away. Not because she pushed them, but because her presence now requires a higher frequency of interaction. One based on mutual respect, not emotional extraction. This is what makes boundaries spiritual. They are not just emotional guidelines. They are the energetic architecture of a woman reclaiming her space in the world. Not with force, but with rootedness. And here's the paradox. The quieter her boundaries become, the more potent they are. Because she no longer feels the need to prove she's been mistreated. She simply removes herself. She no longer waits for someone to change. She changes her direction. This is where silence and boundaries merge. She does not waste time convincing anyone why her boundary is necessary. She simply lives in accordance with it. And those who cannot meet her, they are not punished. They are released. She understands now. Every time I protect my peace, I create space for alignment. Every time I say no to what dishonors me, I say yes to something deeper, my self-worth. And so, boundary by boundary, decision by decision, she builds a life that honors her inner stillness. Not a life that looks perfect on the outside, but one that feels right on the inside. After the boundaries are drawn, not out of anger, but out of reverence, a deeper realization begins to emerge. The external chaos she once fought, pleaded with, and tried to fix, it starts to lose its power. Not because the world changed, but because she did. When a woman aligns with herself, truly, deeply, without compromise, everything around her begins to respond in kind. This is not magic. It is not mysticism. It is cause and effect. You see, for most of her life, she may have tried to bring order by controlling the outside, managing relationships, fixing others' emotions, arranging circumstances just right, so she could finally feel calm. But what she didn't yet realize was that this was backward. Lasting peace does not begin with the outer, it begins with the inner. And the moment she stops chasing external order and begins aligning with her own truth, her nervous system relaxes, her mind clears, her energy returns to its rightful rhythm. This is the power of inner alignment. It is the subtle but life-changing shift from who do they want me to be to who am I when I am no longer trying to be anything. She begins to notice how certain environments affect her body, how certain people leave her feeling depleted, how certain habits, once comforting, now feel like self-abandonment. And instead of pushing through, she listens. She makes adjustments not for performance, but for integrity. Integrity, not in the moral sense, but in the energetic one, to be whole, undivided, in agreement with yourself. Her yes now comes from a place of clarity, not obligation. Her no comes with peace, not guilt. Her presence begins to feel ordered because her choices are no longer scattered. And slowly the world mirrors that. People who once brought confusion disappear. Tasks that once overwhelmed simplify themselves. Doors that once remained locked now quietly open. This is not coincidence. It is coherence. When your inner world becomes quiet, ordered, and intentional, the outer world responds. Not always immediately, not always without friction, but inevitably. Why? Because life organizes itself around structure, and there is no structure more powerful than a mind aligned with the heart, a body aligned with breath, a woman aligned with her values. Now she no longer needs to control everything, because she trusts that what is aligned will remain, and what is not will fall away without force. And this trust brings a new kind of ease, not laziness, not passivity, but a flow that comes from no longer pushing against her own nature. She rises early, not to prove discipline, but because her mornings have become sacred. She nourishes herself, not to fit an image, but to honor the vessel that carries her spirit. She works, not to escape herself, but to express herself. Even rest becomes sacred, because she no longer equates stillness with worthlessness. Everything becomes a mirror of her alignment. The people in her life begin to shift. Those who drain fall away. Those who align move closer. But she no longer chases either, because when she is aligned, she is magnetic. Not through force, but through resonance. She understands now you don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. And what she has become is anchored, not rigid, not cold, but unmoved by anything that lacks harmony. And this alignment doesn't mean perfection. It means returning again and again to what matters, to what's true, to what's real. So when something disrupts her, she doesn't spiral. She pauses, breathes, checks within, and she asks, is this aligned with who I'm becoming? If yes, she continues. If no, she releases. No guilt, no drama, no explaining. This is not avoidance, it's refinement. She is tuning her life like an instrument. Every thought, every habit, every relationship either brings her into resonance or dissonance. And the more she listens, the clearer the melody becomes. It's not about having control over life. It's about being in tune with it. And once she is in tune, everything begins to move with her, not against her. This is the quiet architecture of a powerful woman. She doesn't chase order. She embodies silence, self, focus, presence, boundaries, and alignment. There remains one final shift. A truth so simple that most overlook it. And yet, without it, the rest remains incomplete. That truth is this: letting go is not loss. It is the beginning of flow. A woman can do all the inner work. She can cultivate stillness, build discipline, craft boundaries, find clarity. But if she still tries to control the outcome, she remains in tension. Control is fear disguised as planning. Control is the attempt to guarantee safety by holding tightly to what cannot be held. But life is fluid, and the deeper path, the one walked by the truly free woman, is not built on grasping, it is built on surrender. Surrender does not mean defeat. It means trusting your alignment so deeply that you release your attachment to what must happen next. It means doing your part, and then letting the river carry the rest. This is the moment when a woman realizes she no longer needs to chase. Not people, not status, not timing, not understanding, not closure. She doesn't need to push anymore, because what flows to her now is a match for her peace. When she lets go, she does not lose power, she reclaims it. Because she is no longer exhausted by trying to orchestrate what was never hers to control. This letting go may look quiet on the outside, but inside, it is a profound inner liberation. She lets go of needing to be chosen because she has already chosen herself. She lets go of needing to be understood because she has made peace with her own truth. She lets go of needing to fix what was never hers to repair. She lets go of the timeline that once made her anxious. She lets go of narratives rooted in the past, memories, projections, regrets, and what arises in that space is presence. Not the kind that is practiced, but the kind that flows from not holding on to what no longer serves. Letting go is a sacred trust that what is aligned will remain, that what is true will unfold in its time, that her energy is safest not in control, but in conscious release. She stops micromanaging other people's emotions. She stops scanning every interaction for hidden meaning. She stops holding her breath, waiting for approval. She inhales deeply and exhales completely, because now she trusts the cycle. The law of life is not control. It is rhythm. Inhale, exhale, tension, release, action, surrender. Letting go doesn't mean she stops caring. It means she stops forcing. She begins to notice when she doesn't chase, the right things come. When she doesn't cling, peace arises. When she doesn't react, clarity surfaces. And when she doesn't fear the loss, she is finally free to receive. She no longer needs to beg for what should be naturally offered. She no longer waits for others to validate her path. She no longer needs the storm to settle in order to feel calm, because the calm is now within her. Letting go doesn't mean she never feels the urge to hold on, but she has trained herself through practice, through presence, through sacred pauses, to listen when her grip tightens, to pause when her heart races, to ask herself, am I holding this or is it holding me? And when the answer is clear, she gently releases, not with bitterness, not with blame, but with grace, because she finally understands not everything is meant to be carried forever. Some things are only meant to teach and then pass through. So she becomes like water, soft yet strong, flexible yet clear, yielding yet unstoppable. This is the essence of feminine power, not in resistance but in receptivity, not in grasping but in allowing, not in noise but in flow. And the woman who lets go lets life meet her. She no longer moves with desperation. She moves with devotion to her truth, to her peace, to her path. What doesn't flow with her is no longer her concern. What isn't aligned with her no longer has access. Because she is not here to control life. She is here to dance with it, dice it. There is no force more powerful than a woman who is no longer distracted by the noise of the world, because she has learned to listen to the wisdom within. She is not loud, but she is present. She is not reactive, but she is deeply aware. She does not chase, she attracts, through alignment, not effort. She has realized that stillness is not emptiness. It is fullness without explanation. So if you find yourself in a season of silence, solitude, or sacred separation, do not rush it. Do not doubt it. Everything is not falling apart. Everything is falling into place. And all that is required is that you keep returning to yourself with gentleness, with honesty, with grace. Because the moment you stop performing, the moment you stop explaining, the moment you stop reaching, is the moment everything you were seeking begins to flow toward you.